All right, so this is the next part of the basic overview. So if you haven't seen the video before this, we just basically made a very, very simple app that, well, lets you choose the axis of these datasets, right? So you can do this. But let's get a little bit more advanced. So what about if we have different datasets? So how will we change this? So let's get this out of here. So I want to have many datasets so the user can look through like not just my data, but some of his own data perhaps. But as of now, we'll just run these. So I'll just put these away. So your R is built in with some datasets. So it has empty cars, which we looked at already, and it has iris data. This data is something about flowers, and then we have some air quality data. These are all datasets, and say we want to have this functionality where we select the x-axis and y-axis, but we want to have it for each of these datasets. So you see the problem right now is that we're looking for the names of empty cars, but I want this to be dynamic to what kind of dataset we have chosen here, and then the plot will also be well, it'll have what we need is the data here also to be dynamic to what the dataset the user used. So that means if we want to change the UI, we can't keep it in the UI object, or because this doesn't change, or it can, but it's harder to change it here. It's much easier to change it on the server side. So what we will do at first is I'll just move this down, right? So we will put it right here, and this is not the finished product. We'll come back to this. So now we'll have a good look at dynamic UI. So there are many ways to do this. My favorite way is to use this UI output. So this just means like this. This is an output as like the plot was, but instead of a plot being rendered, we're gonna render some UI, and this also needs an output ID, right? So we're gonna just say this will be the axis select output, right? Okay. That'll be axis select, but we also need someone to select. We have somewhere that we can select the data. We probably can have that right here, right? So we just say, so the input ID is data select. I'll just call it that. The label is select a data set, and the choices are well. Now I need these. I'm going to use the names of these later. So actually, what I'm going to do is say your list. Like this, and I'll auto indent it, and this is the data list, I'll just call it. Let's say empty cars is this one, iris is this one, and air quality is this one. So when we do this, I don't have commas, of course. Sorry about that. There we go. So when we run this, now it's data list, right? We have, okay, it'll just put out everything, but here we have air quality, we have iris, and what's good about this is that now we can use the $ to access these individually, or we can, what I want is like this, so we can say iris like that, and we get the iris data, perfect. So let's take this away. So now we have the data, and we want to be able to choose these. So I'll just say we want the names of the data list. So what does this say? We'll just run this one. Say, it gives me empty cars, iris, and air quality. And by the way, this is why I really, really like the RStudio IDE. It's because I can just do this. I just want to run this tiny little piece of the code. I don't want to run everything. I don't want to run the whole line. I just want what is highlighted. And I can say Control Enter, and I get this. It's just very, very good when you are debugging and working with small changes or doing things like I'm doing right now. It's perfect. I love it. Thank you. So what we're going to do next. So we will have a drop-down menu. We'll have a drop-down menu with these names. Great. And we want now we want our selections of the axis, these names, to change depending on what's in here. So first, change and depending on what data list or data set has been chosen. So first of all, we have to make this an output, right? Because we set UI output here, so we gave it a output ID, And now we want to say, this is what you're going to output. So I called it access select. That's it. And what is it? It is a render UI function. Great. And we also just want everything in one chunk. And remember, the render UI will show, like, the UI that will come out is what stands at the bottom. So if you say, like, I want a hello, and then I want goodbye. It's gonna run all of these, but only the bottom line is gonna be run. So what you would like is maybe a div. So if you're not familiar with the HTML, the div is just like diverse. It just groups elements together. It's HTML. If you don't know it, you don't have to know it. It's just that you know that if you want it to output everything you're going to be putting in this code, you want it to be grouped in the bottom like this. You might know. I might show you what I mean later. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, we want our select inputs in here because now they can be reactive. And we don't need commas actually. Yes, we do, because we're gonna put this in a tag list. So each input is like a tag, and we make a list of tags. That means this function here will output everything that's in the tag list because it's in the bottom. So we'll say empty select input with the x-axis will be output, and select input with this will be output. All right. So now we want the names to be basically we want the names to not be these. We want them to be whatever data set we're using, right? So we have say data list empty cars. So if it's this, you give me those names. If I've chosen the empty cars, and if I've chosen the iris data, it will be this. Great. So how to do this? I might just say, all right. So what we do is just data list. And what's it called? I called data select. So input data select. So if you recall, I had the select input up here where I had the input ID called data select. That let me choose these names down here, and that means that whatever I choose will be put down to choices the names of that data set. So there's happening a lot of things right here. What we're gonna end with is names like this. We're gonna get the column names. That's what we want exactly. Great, and I want to do exactly the same right here. Boop, boop. I have to watch out now, like this with my parentheses. Okay. Oh, don't save that. So now everything should look pretty much the same with additional select input right here. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's not finished yet, but we'll just see if it works at this point. So let me grab this over here. Okay, great. I'm not seeing the... Okay, so something went wrong. I'm not seeing the select input that we asked for. Let's take this away. All right, so we are listening to select. It's a fluid page. Aren't you loading or something? So we get an error. What is the error? The error is that we need a comma right there. So sometimes, I mean, because I've already called UI before or assigned UI before, it just ran the old version. And when I tried to override it and there was an error, it wasn't overwritten, so it just ran the old version. That's why the change didn't happen. When you've missed a comma or put a comma too much or something, parentheses too little or whatever, you'll usually get this error where it just says like unexpected parentheses, find the comma, like find where you're missing the comma. It won't, the IDE won't be good at showing it to you, so you just have to go systematically through all of it. You'll learn to look for it easily. So let's try this again. Zip, zip, we run. Hey, presto. If I go to iris, you see this? What? This isn't, it's an error. What could it be? But it works when it's empty cars. And it still works. But if I go to iris, this one changes correctly, and this one changes correctly, but the data isn't following. So that's our next problem to solve. And of course, the problem is here. We have empty cars. So when I changed the data set, it basically said, okay, in empty cars, find like what flower the car has, right? Obviously, this isn't gonna work. We need to say, what do we need to say here? This is actually gonna be a bit hard. So data list, input, data select. So this means it's the data This means it's the data that I've chosen, right? But now I want to choose the column. So I can do this again, the double brackets again, and say input x-axis. I mean, it's not beautiful, but it's probably gonna work. Let's try this again. So I will just copy you because you're long. I mean, there's other ways to do this. Make reactive inputs, and we'll get to more reactive inputs or reactive values, more like it, later. Right now, we're kind of using our R knowledge more than we're going to use our shiny reactive knowledge. But never mind. We'll try this. So I want the y-axis here. So if I went too quick for you here, what we said is the plot. We want to plot our data. We want to go into our data list, which is all the data up here. Then we want to find out in this data list with the double brackets, we want to say which data. And that's the one we are selecting here. And it has the names iris, empty cars, and air quality, right? So it says maybe iris here. Fine. Then these inputs change. The select inputs or the x-axis inputs change. So they correspond to the dataset that's running. And that's our next. So we first have our data, iris data maybe, and then in that data, look for the column input x-axis, right? Or whatever it says for the x-axis. So that's what it means when you have these four brackets. It doesn't really mean that, but these four brackets together, all these brackets are really just accessing the data deeper and deeper. Good. Well, it should work. Should we try it? Let's run it. And there we go. Oh, now it's the moment of truth. Ah, look at this. Look at this. It's working. It's working. Oh, it's very good. We'll look at the air quality and its temperature. Oh, very good. So we can get really we can get really smart about ozone and air quality, or about flowers now, or if we want to know more about cars, we can know more about cars. So there are different things wrong here. For example, every time we change this data, so we see this line here, that's because we're actually just using the same axis or the same data for both axes. So we get 100% what's it called? Correlation, yeah. And you might see there's just the red text every time I change this. Red text. That red text. You see that? We wanna. Whoa! What the? I've never. Great. This was unexpected. It's probably suddenly made a box plot. Anyways, so later we'll take a look at error handling, and we'll take a look at like default values and putting them in. That'll be the next one. All right. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.